Thank you. Great. So I just took brief notes on the expectations, and I hope I can meet all of them in this session today. But I think I would be honest that HR analytics or people analytics, workforce analytics, these are different terminologies that we would keep hearing, right? When you read different articles, different write-ups, and many of them are referring to probably the same thing. But at the end of the day, I think we are moving away from calling ourselves HR professionals, and we are more becoming people professionals, right? Because there are so many of the functional roles that earlier was under the bracket of maybe HR or non-HR. So let's say mobility, right, used to be something which was, let's say, being handled by immigration and those kind of departments, which not necessarily always rolled up to HR. But today, the definition of mobility has changed, right? And organizations, I was speaking to someone yesterday, and she was telling me that, mobility in the current definition aims at losing people inside the organization rather than letting them go and leave the organization, right? So they set up a mobility team within human resources. And I think the HR business partners take a key role in that to identify talent that are disengaged or not doing well or are looking out for options. And they find out roles for those people in different departments within the organization. It could be a different business unit, it could be the same business unit in a different team. So I think we'll hear a lot of these terminologies. I do have a deck. I'll bring it up. We'll go through the deck, but feel free to stop me at any point. Ask questions, raise your hand, type it in, whatever you all are comfortable with. So I like I was saying, I hope that I'm able to kind of complete everything, or uh, kind of finish each of the expectations, I will say. But I think we'll start with few things that I just want to understand in terms of, let's say, HR matrix, right? Because at the end of the day, HR analytics is all about tracking numbers, let's say some matrices, and we'll define all of these as we progress. But have any of you, right, really, so let's say in terms of HR matrices or HR analytics, how many of you kind of, let's say, you know about HR analytics, you're applying them in your day-to-day job, or you're here for the first time, right, learning about it? So why don't we just use the chat box or unmute yourself just to get a sense of, where are we, each of us, in terms of HR analytics or HR matrices? So what's your comfort level in your current work area? As far as this course is concerned or this session is concerned, I think all of us are learners. So I think all of us are starting somewhere, right? So which all of us are, I think, at the same level. But in terms of your work, have you used HR analytics? Are you doing that on a day-to-day basis? Do you mind kind of letting us know or letting me know through the chat box or just unmute? Right. So I think while the others are typing in, and like I said, as far as this session is concerned, all of us are learners, and I think Leon, just bear with us. Some of the things that you may have attended in the last session could be a little repeated, but I don't think we got a chance to do that follow-up session that we had discussed about in the last course, right? So but this time I definitely want to do the follow-up session because like I said, it's a vast area, right? And it would definitely make sense for all of us to have one dedicated session around the matrices, because I think understanding the matrix is something that impacts the HR and especially the HR business partners takes a session on its own. So I'll definitely request Rita to find out, maybe check with all of you one slot. Happy to do that at a convenient time for all of you. But I think we'll definitely do that this time. other than sharing some of the documents that I have or the collaterals that I have. Wonderful. So I think yes. Fine. Any of the right. Great. So I think that with that, I think I think there was one more question that I had. Okay, so this I think we've already covered. So I think we'll get into a few basics, right? Because it's important for us to. I'm sure all of you can read these up, but this session I think is more about to uh, share some of the basic elements, but also encourage you all to bring up thoughts, ideas, and at any point in time, if you do not agree, don't hesitate. Just this is a session where we kind of discuss and debate, because there are five people, and when we are reading ourselves, there's only one brain, one pair of eyes. It always helps to brainstorm. So if you see, I think and these are none of these right are exclusive. While some of the definitions, some of the list of matrices that I would share subsequently, definitely are things that I've collected across organizations from various sources, but some of the definitions and all are already available on the web, right? But it's important for us to start somewhere. And so what you see on the screen is how do we really collect information. And and what I would urge each one of you to think through when you're going through this is, see, each one of these elements are important. And what do I refer to as elements? HR analytics is definitely the field, or the theme or topic. But when we talk about process of collecting, right, it's as important as really applying HR analytics or analyzing the data. All of you would have heard, when we all learn the basics of computers, we definitely have read or heard somewhere saying, garbage in, garbage out, right? Now, data is something as good as that. Good data is very, very rare. And as HR business partners, as functional experts, right? Managing the data is not that we do on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes we are not mindful about what data we are entering, what data the systems are capturing, and we expect results in terms of analytics or insights. Now that's never possible. The biggest challenge of the HR analytics field, or applications or tools that enable the people analytics, or some of these, you ask anyone, is availability of clean, good data. And majority of the time, around 40 to 50% of the time, actually goes in cleaning up data before the analysis part can kick in or can start off. So I think that's something I want to set the context right from the beginning, because there are some baselines, there are some essential or hygiene factors that we often ignore, and we often do not, we are not mindful on a regular basis. And that really is the biggest challenge the HR analytics field is concerned. While today, definitely there are tools, techniques to analyze unstructured data, and that happens through machine learning and all of those advanced techniques. But those techniques or algorithms also take a lot of time to learn. If the data is not correct, it automatically learns incorrect. Because machine learning is just a replication of how humans learn, right? So that ways, I think I would urge all of you to kind of ensure that when you take back each of these are very important when we go and start applying these. And even before we start analyzing or looking at matrices, clean data is one of the basic requirements. So it's definitely the process of collecting data, analyzing that in order to improve the performance. Like I said in the beginning, there can be various terms, and there are various terminologies that come up. So talent analytics, people analytics, workforce analytics. Overall, I think none of these are very different. Some of these are broader terms covering broader functional areas, and some of these are specific to, let's say, HR. Now, I'll move on, but I think the structure of the presentation will go with the flow. Personally, I believe is it's important for all of us to understand a little bit how the data, how the HR organizations are set up, right? How typically or what are typically the departments under HR. Um, the reason why we need to cover this slide is in the process of understanding HR analytics, right, or applying HR analytics on a day-to-day basis. Like I mentioned, clean data, but who owns that data? It's very important because HR analytics is not just about matrices. It's important, how the matrix comes, from where the matrix comes, who's the owner of that data. Because at the end of the day, as functional experts or as human resources, right, professionals, I'm sure all of you are aware, and we'll cover that in a couple of slides, towards the end. Ownership of data is important because at the end of the day, data has these data, any human resource or any talent analytics data has a lot of personally identifiable information. And as a result of which, all of us are governed by the data laws across the world. I think there are different data laws in different countries. We'll see, a few of them in those slides towards the end. But I think typically the ask or the requirements for any of these data laws across the countries are we are able to store the data, we're able to archive data, we're able to manage the data to the extent that it's protected. So data privacy, data protection, these are two key elements of those laws, right? And at any point in time, we should be able to go back and tell the data owners, right, or the person whose data we are maintaining, and as to what are we using the data for. And if there's any other reason for which we use the data, we need to take an authorization from the person whose data it is. And maybe in Singapore there was an incident initially when COVID hit, and we all, so I'll cover that story towards the end. And the police actually, there was an incident because of which the police went to court, but the police lost because the data was not meant to be used for that purpose. So I'll share that story. But coming back to this slide, if you see this, typically HR organizations, many of the organizations may not have a clear-cut structure for some of these, but the work will be done by someone or the other. It is just that it's because either the organization is a smaller one, because of which they have less people, but the same people are managing the kind of jobs, right? But typically, there are smaller teams which are called the centers of expertise. These smaller teams are the core teams, which could be, compensation benefits. In fact, compensation benefits as a terminology is going away, and there's a broader terminology called total rewards, which is coming in. So that's another thing you may hear, but that's that same as compensation benefits. Performance management, including OD, HR technology transformation, global shared services, mergers and acquisitions. These are smaller teams that sit. Sometimes there are HR policy teams, which could also be rolling up to a center of expertise kind of a definition. These are niche work areas and smaller teams. And then we have the operational units, and I personally have placed HR business partner in the operational unit because they are on the floor, right? They are more closer to business. So all of these operational units, the basic definition that I follow is they're more closer to the clients, or internal clients rather, the employees. So the talent acquisition obviously is on the ground, managing recruitment, and definitely sometimes the onboarding, Then there are HR business partners who are taking handovers from, when someone comes and joins, and all of you are aware of the HR business partner role. And then there are HR operations, which typically could be the compliance, unit, which ensures that there are either local compliance, regulatory compliance in terms of HR, a provident fund, or a PF. Let's say that someone really maintain all the documentations and everything for the legal compliance, and also HR operations typically does that. And then we have the mobility, like I was mentioning, including immigration. Uh, Workforce management is a team which some organizations call out clearly, mostly big IT firms or large firms, but a lot of firms will, the HR business partner or the global mobility teams, or even sometimes talent acquisition teams are doing it. It basically is determination of where the new hires are deployed, right? And then identifying is if a particular project is getting over, then someone is getting released from the project. So they have a specific skill set. So does anyone else need? So it's basically the deployment team which works on a continuous basis with the business teams. And then the learning and development, I think, is something that we all know about. On the right, you see this vertical thing, which is talent acquisition, SS. And so the SS stands for shared services. A lot of organizations these days have a matured shared services model, either in the same geography, or sometimes the practice is to outsource these or offshore these to areas of the world where the costing is less, because these are actually supporting the operational units and doing a large part of the operational work. But I think the difference between what is done by a talent acquisition team and what is done by a talent acquisition shared services, the difference is the shared services units typically pick up any job which is repetitive but highly compliant and process driven. So, why do these need to be separated? Because sometimes, it's more value adding for the front end teams or the operational units to be doing those kind of interactive roles, or roles which are more value adding in terms of the business impact. So let's say today a business HR business partner has to, do employee engagement activities, or sometimes, employee entertainment activities. Now, if the entire thing has to be managed by the HR business partner, while a lot of organizations, these kind of responsibilities lie with the HR business partner, some of the organizations which are bigger, right, do not want the HR business partners to spend time on, let's say, planning an event and all of those. But if the outcome of the event is, needs to be discussed, decided, that's done by the HR business partner. They face the clients, the business unit heads, and have those conversations, more strategic conversations. And while, planning the event, still the event has to happen, right? So that's taken care, let's say, by the HR ops shared services, because they support the HR business partners. So if you see a broad structuring of the shared services units, you will find a link between each of the operational units and one of the talent of the shared services department. So if you see talent acquisition shared services, basically is a back-end unit of talent acquisition. Similarly, workforce management shared services is for workforce management. Payroll SS actually supports comp and ben team. HR Ops shared services is from HR operations, performance, immigration, learning. The PMO, or the project management shared services, so immigration rolls up to global mobility. Project management office shared services is a new concept that's coming up. A lot of IT companies have realized that they had a lot of senior people sitting in the on-site locations, which are high-cost locations, but not necessarily all of them need to be there doing the kind of jobs they're doing. So they set up, offshore centers, offshore departments where they had mid-level people, not senior people as they had in the on-site locations, and they offshored the work, right? Definitely, there was a huge cost saving, given that many of the PMO or the on-site people who were sitting with senior people who were doing client interactions. So whatever was not required, I think this was about 2018, 19 kind of, when there was a cost cutting. And when COVID hit, I think a lot of that really made sense. I'll take a pause here to see if anyone has any questions around this. I'm not saying that every organization, like I mentioned, will follow the structure, but the kind of work that gets done is same throughout, right? So someone or the other does the work. There may not be a clear-cut organizational department by these names. But this is how you will find a lot of the names, and why it's important for us to know this. We'll see in one or couple of slides below as to, I like I mentioned, the reference of who owns the data. That's very important. Yeah, so I'll take a pause here to see if there are any thoughts, comments. Feel free to share. Okay, so I'll take that as a no. I'll move ahead, but feel free to just maybe type or just speak up. Now let's see how how the people analytics piece pans out, right? In terms of an HR organization or a people organization, whatever we call, right? So if you see, what I've done is to match, what an employee is going through vis-a-vis what the organization, which organization department is supporting that particular phase, employee life cycle phase. I've done a mapping. Now, why are these important? I think some of these may not have a direct link with HR analytics or analytics as such, but I think I always, think it's very important for us to know the source of the data. Who's the provider of the data? Whose data is it? And on the organization side, who's owning the data? Why is it important? It's important because, again, if there is a discrepancy in the data, who owns it up? Who's responsible for going and correcting it? If there's a data breach, who is supposed to kind of go ahead and analyze, right, what other data or what other elements got impacted, right? Has anyone else's data, been impacted? While there are specific technology teams, I think understanding the functional element is extremely important. The other reason why we need to understand this is there are the same data points that an employee provides. However, if you see, and I'm sure all of you would have experienced or witnessed this at some point or the other, that there are multiple times that data is used, and definitely employee data is used time and again, right? So let me give an example of, if talent acquisition team or the onboarding team is collecting passport as a data, as information, passport information, and then the document, a copy of the passport, that particular information is being identified, let's say, for as an ID proof at the time of joining. So that's the only reason why they're using it. But they're archiving the data at a later point in time. If there's a travel that needs to be initiated, the same information is now used by a different team, right? Now, at that point in time, if they realize that the passport information was not collected, right, whose responsibility was it? It's not the immigration team's responsibility. So one, the employee would, have to come and, probably, submit the data again, while the employee may still be asked to, review and reconfirm the information, but still the availability of data becomes another challenge for us to seamlessly function across departments. And that's why, setting the ownership is very important. And all of these, right? I've gone through all of these extensively, given that, I used to manage the HCM or the HRIS for almost 7+ years during my tenure with Cognizant, and then later on the compensation data as part of my next role in the World Bank. But I think ownership of data is always a big challenge. So here, what I've done is broadly the employee goes through 5 life cycle phases. So they come into the organization as part of the hiring process, then they are trained and deployed into the organization departments in their business units. There's an ongoing, and many of these, the deploy, engage, reward definitely is an ongoing process. It's a cycle, right? Because they may actually come back and after a project go back and get deployed in other projects or other business units, and then they kind of stay there. They go through various things on a regular basis, and then they definitely have reward. So they get the performance appraisal happens on an annual or with whatever the frequency the organization policy is, and then they have a compensation benefit, and finally, either due to retirement or involuntary, voluntary, there's a separation process. Now each of these, so there's a, if on top you see the employee's journey, and then you see each of the HR functional areas or HR teams, departments that support each of these phases. um, Okay, so we'll come back to this question, but I just wanted to show you all the next phase of what you saw in the previous slide. So this becomes now the most important thing, or the next important thing, let me call it, in our data journey or analytics journey. While we understand the relationship between employees' journey and the HR functional areas, the next important thing is, where is these data collected and stored? Um, these days, I think, digitization, automation, systems, all of these are extremely important. Now, many organizations, even today, right, or maybe the small and medium sector enterprises today, use systems. Largely, I think using an HRMS is something which is very common. So you'll find a lot of these already in place, but there could be organizations who are still doing a lot of these, or majority of these. Even it could be in Access database, or it could be in even Excel files. Now, even then, even if, so irrespective of the tools they're using, it is important for us to understand that there, for each of the HR functional area, right? So you see talent acquisition and onboarding, there are systems related to it. Now, again, why is it important for us to track or know, which system is storing which data? Because going back into the point to the point of GDPR, or let's say any of the data or data protection or data privacy laws, the employee is authorized, or employee can at any point in time come and ask us, where are you storing your data? How are you using my data? So all of those datas are sitting in HR systems, right? So it's important for us to know that. So if you see here, and you feel free to just consume the slide now, but I'll anyways be sharing a copy of the slide, so you'll have these. But there could be more, right? There could be different other applications which are internal to many organizations. But if you largely see, I've tried capturing broad system elements of where each of these data are stored and shared with other teams who need to use the data, with the employee at times, because employee is also authorized to see their own data. May not be all of it, but whatever is the personally identifiable information. Now, I'll take a pause on this slide because I find this slide one of the most important slides in the HR analytics or people analytics journey. Sometimes, as HR business partners, in reality, what happens is we lose, we are not able to relate, right? Which team do I go to, right? And these are various, kind of either work data or personal data, which needs to be assimilated, right? Which needs to be analyzed holistically for the HR business partner to reach certain decisions, because each of these decisions are about individual employees. Their situations are different, their personal situations are different, their professional journeys are largely different. So with each of these, I think it's important for them to be aware as to which system the data is coming from. and that does really add a lot of value when someone is aware upfront as to which system should I look at, because many times the data is also protected by access. So some of the data may not be available for you readily, so you have to ask for access. And if you need to ask for access to that data, which team do you go to? So many times we just go to the HRIS team or the reporting team, but sometimes it's important to go and clarify the data from what you get from the reporting team. So who's the owner of the data at that point in time? You're about to have a conversation about a promotion conversation about two employees, and both of them are doing well, both of them more or less has good previous ratings, almost similar journey. Now maybe you're trying to decide which employee to promote, and you're about to have that discussion, and you quickly want to know what were the last three ratings, what was the last three project reviews, right? Now, you obviously would have access to that data given that you are the HR business partner for that business unit. But let's say you're trying to accept an employee, right, from another business unit for whom you don't have the access to the data readily. Now, whom do you go to? Obviously, you'll have to either go to the performance team or the team which is giving you access, who'll reach out to the performance team because they're authorized to, share the data. So I'll take a pause here and see if there's any thought around the slide before I move on.
I have a question. I think on the project management module, right? Does the company usually have this track via the PMO team in itself across the organization, working on all the different projects across the functions?
Mm-hmm. So the cost, so definitely the PMO team, has a track of the project cost. The project managing the project cost is one of the elements. But I think the cost piece is also managed by, in my experience, there is this team which is called the Financial Planning and Analysis Team. They are generally called the FP&A. FP&A teams play a very critical role in the financial planning or the budgeting and the expense tracking for every business unit at a project level. So even if the project management team has a cost element, they would probably be doing it for that project only. But the FP&A team actually does it for the entire BU. So mostly the entire business unit has one team or one or more members, depending on the size of the business unit, supporting them on the overall financial planning. So many times it's the primary responsibility of the FP&A team and the business unit head to manage the project cost, while the project management team could be given a view of what's happening at the project level. Because if they have to, let's say, uh, add two more developers, right, who have to really come and support a particular system development, they come at a cost. Everything comes at a cost. Every person who's joining the team has a cost allocation. What's the implication of that to the larger financial budgeting and the expense layout? I think is done along with the FP&A team.
I have another question on the employee productivity tracking. Like, how relevant is this in today's where, we are moving towards, people doing hybrid working, and then, the hours, and then all this is no longer that relevant. Like, how do we measure productivity now?
Okay, so productivity, I'll be honest. I think the definition or how we are defining the matrix of productivity is becoming more and more complex, like you're saying, right? But there are, at a high level, there are three ways in which it is being done. One is, let's say we look at a resource center, or let's say an operations center, where they are mostly ticket based, right? So they get X number of requests on a particular day, which gets divided amongst the number of people who are in the team or who are present on that day, working on that day. So let's say if there are 100 tickets that come on a particular day, there are 10 people, so each one of them would get 10 tickets, right? How do they turn around each one of those tickets at the end of the day is one measure of their productivity on that day, right? Now, again, there are various elements to this because largely what happens is some of the teams, some of the tickets could be a highly complex ticket, right, or a process which is highly complex. So I think the organization, there are definitely certain matrices that are pre-agreed, saying if it's a compensation benefits ticket which is a high dollar value, which is definitely a complex process, ideally they should be solving, let's say, 10 tickets a day. But if it's an easy process, just a FAQ on leaves, right, or other operational things, right, they probably, the expectation is, or the balance is that every employer, every person has to turn around about, let's say, 15 tickets a day. So based on that, I think, is one way the service centers or process driven or ticket driven, business units drive productivity. If you look at any of the other units, or if I now go back to the slide of the HR structure or human resource departments, if you look at the operational units in terms of the shared services, all of those organizations work in the way of ticketing or any of these ticket based or service request based numbers of productivity, while quality is definitely the other checkpoint that happens, right? Because productivity cannot just be, I solved 10 tickets, but all of those tickets really don't reach the level of productivity. So I think in the process flow of solving a ticket, many organizations in the entire ticketing system, there are many of these ticketing systems, right? Remedy, there are NeoCase, there are many of these ticket based systems. So there is a step where there is a quality check. So someone who's a little senior in the team actually sitting and X number of tickets are actually done a quality check. Some processes which are very sensitive, very high dollar value, all the requests go through a quality check, right? So that's there. The other thing I think that often happens is the service level agreement. So I'm getting 10 tickets today, but those are not the 10 tickets that I'm solving today because I have pending tickets from the previous day, right? So there's a service level agreement. Am I also maintaining an average service level agreement that is agreed upon or that is quoted to the client? So that's, I think, another way the productivity is also measured overall for the department. The other things, if you go back to so the operational units mostly go this way, right? But if you go to a a compensation benefits team, or if you go to yeah, let's say compensation benefits. For them, there are monthly activities that they do. So let's say payroll processing is one of the downstream things. So I think the comp and ben team and the payroll team together does the payroll processing for the month. So obviously for them at a monthly level, productivity is everyone gets paid on time, right? And the right amount. Uh, but if you go to a performance team, they may not have a weekly productivity check, right, on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. For them, it could be efficiently running the performance management process as per the cycles. It could be a quarterly cycle, it could be a half yearly, or it could be an annual cycle. But so the measure of productivity actually changes. When you go move from a center of expertise, which are small niche teams, to service-based teams. With a hybrid piece of work, I think tracking productivity through systems. So what happens? There are various ways. Sometimes there are cases where you just have to be available as an on-call engineer, right? And that's, you may not get any tickets for that day, but were you available for the entire time? There are systems that are tracking your login log out time, right? And it also tracks the time that you locked your system and moved away from the system. So the technology definitely helps, as far as many of these in the hybrid work model. So, but I think at the end of the day, it's that specific department and what is the need for that particular BU in terms of the process. If we can even go sub process, and that's how I think the productivity is being defined. The main problem that is happening today is the entire thing is now sitting on managers, the team managers, right? And HR is only driving it as a policy, process, and adherence, but the managers have to deliver it. So suddenly, it's not only the productivity. I think the process of goal setting has also become suddenly a very regular process than an annual process, because every day my team member is coming and telling me, there are X number of tickets which I couldn't solve because I need your inputs. Those are, tickets that I've never been able to handle. I've never handled before, new scenarios. And hence, availability of team members who can solve those problems, get those tickets out, are complexities that I think a day in, day out team manager is trying to solve. So there are various ways, we can, take so that's where I think there's an extensive list of matrices, which definitely, we can spend time. I'll be sharing that list, but in terms of productivity, I think we can go on discussing, for hours together, how it's being tracked and managed in the current work scope.
Thank you.
Right. Right. So I think I'll move on. Okay, so let's say, I think one of the things, questions that was here, and I'll keep this on for about 10-15 seconds to hear if any of you feel, what any of you feel that, from an HR standpoint, how important is, matrices. I'm sure all of us agree that, matrices are important, because that's how we keep tracking the success of the process, sub process, and what are we really delivering, right? I think that goes without saying. But I think where I would like to keep check back with each one of you, and I know that, please don't feel inhibited, because because even if we are beginners, we may have heard about some of the matrices, right? So why if any of you have heard about HR matrices, right? Do you mind sharing a couple of them that you've heard about? Uh, you can unmute, or you can type in whatever you're comfortable with. And this is where I think the points that we were covering in terms of the departments, the HR functional areas.
Probably again I would like to share. So if it's
Go
for
ahead.
TA, the metrics would be hire to plan. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then if it's for probably for HRBP, probably the employee engagement and
Yeah.
also retention, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if it's for HRIS, probably the quality or the accuracy of data provided. I
Awesome.
can be wrong on the last one.
No, you're not. They do track the accuracy and the availability, and they go back to the team which was originally supposed to fill in that data. So you're not wrong. They have a responsibility towards identifying the data gaps in the systems and in the HR database. Yeah. So turnover, satisfaction survey, all of these, all of these are correct, right? So I think. Moving on, I think let's look at some of the key matrices. I call them key, but there could be organization-specific matrices which are more important and completely aligned with all of those, because certain organizations have certain things, business outcomes they are trying to address or chase. So if you look at recruitment, and these are some of the things that I've collected over a period of time from various research, from various discussions, from various databases. If you look at it, I think, and I've listed few. I have an exhaustive list which I would be more than happy to share, and that's the session I was mentioning to Lian, that we should have one session which is dedicated for discussion on HR matrices or key matrices that you all want to discuss. Because what the way I generally end this session is go through all of these and then leave you with these slides for you to go back and check what are the key matrices that your organization in your role, right, are important from an organization standpoint. And I'll be more than happy to get a input of those ahead, and we do a follow-up session where we go through all of those key matrices. And before that, I'm more than happy to share the entire list of key matrices that the other matrices that I have. But if we quickly go through each of these, and I'm sure some of you spoke about employee engagement, and turnover. So if you look at it again, functional area wise, and Michael, you're right. For each of the functional areas, there would be different matrices that would be tracked, and all of them definitely impacts the other person or other departments, other BUs time and again. And so if we go ahead and see recruitment largely, why is employment brand strength very important matrix for recruitment? Because at the end of the day, people have to be willing to work for that or for your organization, right? How do you really, attract someone to join your organization? It is how strong your brand is. And the main thing that we really want to track is how proud do we feel to work for an organization, right? But that where everything has a number attached to it, and how do we really measure that employment band strength? Many organizations call it EVP, or employee value proposition, and many of those. And then there are key matrices like how many recruitment source breakdown, because each of these come with a cost. How much external hiring is happening vis-a-vis internal mobility, how many rehires are happening, offer to joining ratio. I think this is one of the biggest challenges that recruitment and onboarding teams have today. How many people they offer and how many people really turn up to join, right, is a big uh, gap these days. I think I hear that it's only about 20% at the most for large organizations. And this is one of the challenging times for recruitment or talent acquisition teams. So moving on, I think when we look at the deployment or the workforce management, those kind of teams, how many of the job postings were really closed successfully through internal hiring, how many of each of these people, each of the different career tracks, right, were fulfilled, or how many people employees had different career paths. Did someone move across teams and successfully found roles or found a career progression? Those are things internal movement or the workforce management teams track. I think the other thing they also track along with the L&D team is, which I was recently hearing, and I'm sure I'll include it in the slide before sending across, is availability of skills. So I think the workforce management team, so I was reading this article, Gartner article, where it says that about 80%, or I think the number is above 80 or 84% of large organization CEOs and CHROs or HR heads are saying that the skills that are needed to do the job they are doing. So the job is changing, or the business deliverables are changing. So based on the vision they have in terms of what will happen in the next 18 to 24 months, they are saying they do not have that set of skill sets in the organization for the existing employees. Now, that how much is the skill gap is another key matrix the workforce management team is trying to identify, basis what work is coming in as new projects, new engagements, vis-a-vis what kind of those skill sets are available within the organization, right, for them to fulfill those new projects. That's a very key matrix that's being tracked these days. And I think learning and development team definitely becomes a big consumer of that information. And that's what I meant when I said that each of these metrics could be tracked or owned by certain functional areas, but other functional areas really consume those, and they could have action items out of those. So for the skill gap matrix, like I said, 84% of the senior managements feel that in the next 18 to 24 months, what kind of changes are coming up, they don't have people to deliver roles, deliver those projects. Now, what does it mean for them? Either go for external hiring, or upskill, reskill the internal employees, and then that becomes an action item for the L&D team. Similarly, I think typical cost matrix from a recruitment standpoint or talent acquisition are cost per hire. I think is definitely one of the key metrics every organization tracks. Referral rate, conversion rates, in the sense, many organizations have these referral programs. So, employees can refer at their people whom they know, their friends, and then they could come and join. And then, part of the recruitment cost is actually given to the employees. It has been seen that referral costs, the referral programs are most of the time successful if the employees really are diligent about referring their friends and acquaintances, because it comes at a much lower cost. And I think the employees who are referring already does the culture alignment check. So the softer elements piece is already checked, and it's only the hard skills that the new employee needs to align to. So I think a lot of these, work well in many organizations. There are many times where sign-on bonus is given. In terms of the turnover, I think a key interesting thing is to see how there are various elements, right? So it's called turnover, but let's say it can be called either the retiral matrix, attrition matrix, turnover, whatever you call it. But I think some of the headers under that are, the retention rate. I think one of you mentioned about the retention rate, right? Very important. I think these days, one of the key things that organizations are doing is they're moving away from exit interviews, right? They're moving away from exit survey, and they're also they are doing the other way around. They're actually interviewed. I think one of the Indian companies, they did a survey of employees who stayed back, and from there, they really churned out insights and added on to their employment brand strength, or the EVP, the employee value proposition. Very insightful, because people who left, there was a different analysis done as to why they left. But many times it is seen that, before a 18-month period, employees who are leaving many times do not want to disclose the actual reason or their feelings or emotions. I think they just want to move on, unless they're really moving on for personal reasons, family reasons, education, right? So those are kind of involuntary, those are voluntary, which the organization can never stop, right? But with hybrid work, with remote work, I think a lot of those are also being retained these days. Now, so that's where termination reason breakdown. While they mention some reason, I think one organization did. I don't know if it's IBM, but they did this exit interview analysis for employees who left. I think one year. For a period of 1 year, and they maintained the data. They reached out to the same employees, and at that point in time, those were ex-employees. And 1 year later, and did another survey. The about 60% of the reason for termination, I mean reason for leaving, was completely different. So that gave them an understanding that people do not really disclose the right reasons why they're leaving. Mostly disengaged employees don't want to do that. Employee engagement surveys, extremely important. I've seen organizations which give a very high value to employee engagement surveys. There are teams that are formed, right, around various themes. It could be career expectations, it could be, let's say, salary bracket differentiations, various elements or themes, and action items are given to those teams, and they report to either the CHRO or the HR head, or different COE heads to deliver those. And I'm talking from one of the most organizations which has been there for a very long time, talking of the World Bank, and I'd seen the seriousness with which they used to come back. So why is it important for us to understand all of this? That in HR analytics, it's not just about consuming data. It's not just about reading the information. It's also about insight building. It's about what action we take out of those, because that's what makes the difference. the employee engagement, see, all of these indexes, matrices only make sense when the input is correct. And for employee engagement surveys, mostly, or satisfaction surveys, whether it's a client satisfaction survey or an employee satisfaction survey, I think the employees will not provide the right information unless they really see some action being taken from a previous survey or a previous inputs that was given. So there are some organizations who just don't follow through, right? But many organizations give a very high importance and they follow through so that they continue to get right inputs year on year. But that's also definitely part of the functional role when we consume some of the matrices and then build action items out of those. So, and then, from a cost angle of turnover, I think it's also, how much, the cost is there. Uh, is there a cost outflow from the organization in terms of, a voluntary termination or a involuntary termination, all of those, right? So if we're letting people go, then is there a an amount that the organization pays them as either as to make them as a bonus in terms of them asking them to leave early or letting them go. So there's a cost to all of those, right? So those are definitely things that organizations track.